I've spent 100 hours preparing for a dream job interview. I studied the company's history, culture, and products. I've learned everything you could learn from the outside. I've participated in 12 different interviews for the same position. I've mastered the preparation, introduction, interview flow, and follow-up questions. Did I get the job in the end? How is it even possible to spend 100 hours simply preparing for the interview? What was my process, step by step, and what did I learn? If you're curious to know, then watch this video until the end. Let's go! I should probably introduce myself first. I have worked in the game industry for 12 years, half as a game designer and currently as a director of product. We're creating mobile games and I'm responsible for the game's financial success and ultimately the team. I've been on 100 interviews myself and I interviewed at least 300 people. I've been on both sides and know how it works and what people want. So with all that knowledge, I still have to prepare for the interview since every company is different, their products are different, and they have different expectations from the candidates. That's precisely why I set out on a journey to ready myself for anything. Now that we passed a quick introduction, let's talk about introducing yourself during the interview. I've invested hours in thinking what's the best way to present myself. Why is it so important? Well, the introduction is the first thing people learn about you. They form the first impression based on it, which is challenging to change afterward. It is your opportunity to mention anything that shows you in the best light, which is much harder to do within the constraints of questions as interview continues. At the same time, many interviewers will ask follow-up questions based on your introduction, so you can pave the path to the topics you feel the most comfortable and knowledgeable about. It is the part you can practice 100% because you know it happens in each interview, unlike practicing for most common questions that may or may not be asked. Knowing how important that is, you shouldn't hesitate to spend a considerable amount of time on this point. I wanted to tell the story of my experience and I wanted to highlight the following points: what brought me to game development and that I'm still passionate about my work. What were the reasons behind every move to a new company and a shift from game design to product management? The most significant achievements throughout my career, but focus only on more recent and relevant ones to my current role. What did I learn in my roles and my most significant projects? And add a few personal elements to the storytelling, a little bit more about myself as a person, so they could easier relate to me and not see me as just a collection of work-related achievements. The trick with the introduction is to craft a truthful story about your successes and sprinkle it with your failures and learnings to show that you're self-aware and constantly working on improving. One extra trick you could do is research the company in detail and weave some of that information that would align with their values during your introduction. I spent countless hours researching the company I was applying to, so I learned that one of its defining aspects is its culture of ownership, freedom, and responsibility. I'm really passionate about that, so I worked on my introduction to show that not having such a culture disappointed me in my previous companies. This way, I could show that my views align with what they're looking for in the first few minutes of the interview. Think about your introduction similarly and craft it individually for each company as you would prepare your resume or a cover letter. By the way, if you want to know more about strategies to prepare for the interview, make sure to check out my recent video. After I nailed my introduction, I wanted to think about my past, understand where I was coming from, and how my 10 years of work experience affected and changed me as a professional and a person. We often are driven by our goals and the future, so we keep looking forward and rarely dedicate time to think retrospectively about our achievements, but more importantly, failures and how we can be better. But if we sit down and spend some days or even weeks thinking and reflecting on our past, what went wrong? What were the right choices? And more importantly, what can we learn from it that is very useful for our future, but the interview as well? So I sat down and thought about the people I worked with, my attempts to build the teams, where I failed, how I improved on it, and how I failed again. It's funny how our life in the end is just a myriad of mistakes we make every day. We see something that worked for us in the past and try to apply it in the new place, but we misunderstand the circumstances and the new reality entirely, so nothing works and we make the wrong conclusions. There were times when I expected very little from my teams, took too much on myself and left no ownership for everybody else. But as I learned that it was not the way, I often gave too much freedom to people who were not ready for it, which ended up even worse. The more I worked, the more I realized that you couldn't rely 100% on your experience. A valuable lesson I have extracted is that you should approach everything like it's your first time, be curious and try to understand the new environment before making any decisions. As for the interview, I've prepared an extensive list of my most significant lessons from failed products, situations where I was the manager and didn't do my job well, situations where my managers disappointed me, and situations where I had to learn how to work with peers where power dynamic didn't exist. With this list of lessons and failures, I was ready to talk about my experience honestly. I got a lot of positive feedback on being self-aware, reflective, and ready to learn and keep improving, which are invaluable qualities everybody is looking for. After being done with the introduction and introspection, I started pouring hours and hours into researching the company and its products. Since it's a games company, its products are, well, games. I began with the job description, trying to understand what exactly they were looking for. Luckily, the position was for a specific game, so I could prepare much more in depth than I could otherwise. I started my research by playing this game as much as I could every day, putting myself in a regular player's shoes. I was playing it on two phones simultaneously. This way I could get the experience of two different customers at the same time. I know this one is hard to do in other industries. Suppose you're getting a job in a bank or an Amazon or whatever, you can't put yourself in a customer's position like with games. Nonetheless, learn as much as you can. Read what other people who use their products think and what they complain about. Then I wanted to learn more about how they work, so I went to YouTube and watched all the videos where they speak about their products, how they approach development, how they organize the teams, and what they have learned over the years. That information was insanely valuable, as I could get a sneak peek into the company's processes and approaches. I checked all the interviews and conference presentations the CEO gave as he spoke about forming the company's culture, how its strategy changed over the last 10 years, and his vision for the company.
Instead of the vision being communicated top-down, what if it was bottoms-up? What if the real superstars actually would be the game developers themselves? And what if the management and the founders and the leadership and everybody else was there just to make sure that they are as successful as possible?
My first interview was with CEO, so it was quite relevant. Then I needed to understand how players felt about these games. I went on Reddit, on the YouTube comment section and Discord, and read and engaged in conversation with other people to understand what they liked and what bothered them, to find opportunities for me to discuss and propose improvements. With all of the above, I was able to understand how they work, how they take decisions, all the failures and successes of the company since it existed, get different point of views on its future and the current strategy, and learn what players thought about the game and what was missing. I was ready to create my action plan. What the heck is an action plan? For me, it's crucial to go to an interview, knowing what they're looking for and what I will do if they hire me. I prepared a written plan on what the team might be missing, how I could contribute with my experience and knowledge, what were the most significant flaws in the product, and how I would help fix those over the long term, building upon the strength of the company and the team. I knew exactly what I wanted to do in my first days, weeks, and months. Then, of course, I read the room on each interview. I didn't march forward with my ideas, trying to push them to an interviewer at the first opportunity. On the contrary, I was asking questions, initiating a two-way conversation, and trying to understand if they were looking for solutions or if they already had an idea of how they wanted to solve these issues. Sometimes we exchanged ideas. Sometimes I would share my thoughts in detail. Sometimes I would ask why they haven't tried yet this or that. It was engaging for everybody, and not only was it a good interview and conversation, but we could also learn from each other no matter how the interview ended. As I mentioned before, there is another video I did in recruiting that goes into detail about building a two-way conversation. With the research done and the action plan ready, it was time to prepare for the usual stuff. There are various questions you might be asked no matter what. To prepare for the questions, I searched the internet to catch them all. Questions like, how do you respond to criticism? How do you deliver negative feedback? How to build a successful team? Many of the questions I was preparing were aimed at managers as I was interviewing for a head of the game, but every role will have questions like these. What are your most significant weaknesses and strengths? Tell us about a conflict you had at work and how did you resolve it? What do you do when you disagree with your manager? I don't want to go into details about the suitable answers to all these questions, but let me know if you'd like me to make another video in the comments. Of course, there are right and wrong answers, but what you should do is write down all these questions and your responses to them. Do your research. Think of the answers you would like to hear if you interviewed somebody and ask them the same question. Often people struggle just because they don't do the extensive preparation beforehand. I'm confident everybody can come up with some great answers if you put your mind to it. Since my interview process lasted for months, I started reading some books about leadership and business overall during that time. I started reading around 10 books, but as it goes with business books, many of them didn't seem helpful. There were 2 books by Ben Horowitz that taught me many lessons and left me thinking. The first one was The Hard Things About Hard Things. Ben shared his struggles as CEO trying to build his company, his hardships, and how he constantly changed his approach to survive and grow his business. I love how he says to take care of people, products, and profits in that particular order. If you want to feel like you're inside a CEO's mind that doesn't know if his company gonna go bankrupt tomorrow, that's the book for you. And another one is What You Do is Who You Are. In this book, he talks about the culture of successful companies and what it takes to make an impact. It has a lot of great advice on building a good culture, whether you are a CEO or just a team lead of 3 people. But more importantly, Ben uses excellent real-life examples that show that companies are no different from any other part of society. Throughout the book, he analyzes several historical examples. The one that stuck with me the most was Toussaint Louverture's story, a man who was born as a slave in Haiti and became a leader of the revolt to eradicate slavery. That is the only significant successful slave revolt in our history. It happened because Toussaint was very strict about having the proper culture and principles upon which he built a new society. He took savages that wanted revenge and led them to do their best to create a new country. No matter your position, I recommend reading these books since they will give you perspective about leadership and the effort it takes to build anything significant. I could extract many lessons from it that I could weave into my interview answers, but I applied them afterward in my day-to-day job to be a better leader and make better teams. As I went to each of the interviews, not only was I preparing to answer the questions I was asked, but I had a massive list of questions myself. I had a standard list of questions that I asked everybody to compare their answers and get different points of view. Something like, why did they join that company? What does make this company unique for them? How did they manage to deal with work from home? What were the most significant challenges they were facing? This way, I could cross-reference their answers and see how people with different roles perceive the same issues. But I also asked individually crafted questions for everybody, based on their role, previous products, and experiences. I was curious to know more about their personal journeys and wanted to show that I cared deeply about everybody, not just getting a job. At the same time, I asked for feedback, often directly on the spot, about what they thought about my answers and how I fared versus their expectations. If I didn't have time, I followed up after the interview to hear back and understand what didn't go well. I wrote my impressions after each interview, building a picture of the role over time. It helped me to perform even better in the following interviews. So with all these preparations, you're probably wondering whether I got that damn job. I almost did. Everything was going perfectly and I was receiving positive feedback each step of the way until at the end of the process I received negative feedback from one of the company's internal employees with whom I had previously worked together. It seemed that I was quite an asshole 7 years ago when I moved to Europe for the first time. Lessons learned: don't be an asshole. But really, keep in mind that all your actions have consequences. It's essential to know people, and it's even more important to leave a good impression for people to want to work with you again. I genuinely believe I have changed as a person since then, and I care about people these days, but we can't change the past. Now, do I think these interviews were a waste of time? Not at all. If anything, I learned a great deal during the process and improved as a person and as a professional. Should you prepare for each interview with this diligence? I don't think so, unless you really want to get that job and have time for it. But remember that there will be crazy people like me who will do it, and you might be competing for the spot with them. I hope you learned something new from my personal experience, and you will prepare for your following interview much better. I'm a new creator, and I really need your support to continue creating content. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and check the rest of my videos. Thanks for watching. I appreciate each one of you. See you another time.